actually starting the continuation of Rule 5. And we left off about talking about what the masters look for in people that can assist the hierarchy in the work. And all of us want to assist the hierarchy in the work in some way and manifest the kingdom of God here upon the earth. That's the goal. DK tells us that the kingdom of God, or the new age, will be pretty much fully in about 150 years from now. So it's not going to be something that's going to happen at the snap of a fingers. And when you look over the past 150 years, we see that there's been a lot of changes, but changes of the human spirit don't really happen overnight. They happen over a period of time. And each generation we see has a little bit different consciousness. Like back in the 60s, it was the anti-authority people, anti-government people, the hippies were creating all kinds of change in the anti-war movements. And now it's kind of the opposite people. Instead of people saying question authority, everybody's accepting authority now. So we go through these shifts. The pendulum swings back and forth, and each time it swings with a little bit different amount of energy that creates a little bit more change until we reach a point where there's a big shift of consciousness over a period of time. But so we can work toward change, but I find that people are often disappointed that change doesn't happen immediately. I remember when I was back in the 60s and people were expecting the second coming of Christ no later than the year 2000. And a lot of people were expecting it at the end of the decade in the 60s. And then when the 70s come, a lot of people were expecting big changes and earthquakes and World War III back then, and then that didn't happen. Then when 1984 approached, everybody thought, well, this is going to be Big Brother surfacing. There's George Orwell's book is really about a giant conspiracy that elite have planned to take over the world in 1984, and then 1984 passed and nothing happened. And same thing in the 90s, and then people were predicting Planet X about 40 times now. Different people have predicted Planet X to show up and create great havoc and destruction, and that's never occurred. And so a lot of people have been really disappointed. And I've seen a lot of people come and go because I've been a seeker pretty much all my life, and rubbed shoulders with a number of different thinkers that are hoping for some type of big change to occur. And I noticed that they're really enthused and think a big change is going to occur. And then when a big change doesn't occur, then they just bag everything and go live kind of a normal life. A lot of them do. So a lot of people come and go. The ones that stay focused on the goals in a way that they can actually be of service to the higher lives are those that are kind of like the tortoise rather than the hare. They just keep on plugging away, moving step by step, and they're not disappointed that they aren't able to take a giant leap forward. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't times that a big leap forward does happen. That happens once in a while, but most of the time we have to move forward like the hare, one step at a time, and not be disappointed no matter what happens. Just keep on proceeding. Even if you're moving ahead and it appears nothing is happening, something is still happening. There's always something happening. When you put energy into something, something is always happening. like you add some sugar to water, the sugar goes between the molecules, and you put a little bit of sugar in it, it looks like nothing happened. It just disappears. You put a little bit more and nothing's happened. Then you put enough in, it crystallizes, it reaches a saturation point. And you see that something has been happening all along. You just weren't, weren't aware of it. Okay. He says more knowledge must be acquired as to the nature of thought and matter. And this must be followed experimentally by those with acute and trained minds and a high rate of vibration, and bodies built of the finest matter. This attainment will involve discipline, pain, self-abnegation, and abstinence. Well, if people like to enjoy themselves, that doesn't sound like very good news. But yeah, it does. Every step we move forward takes a lot of discipline and takes a certain amount of sacrifice. But he says what the masters look for in students and people that they can contact. Now remember, contact can come a number of different ways. If you're fortunate, you may actually have an actual contact with one of the higher teachers, and that is something in your conscious mind. Other times you will have contact during your sleep. Remember, during your sleep, the mental part of you, the decision-making part of you, actually goes back to the realm of the soul and the higher self. And you're doing all kinds of things there you can't remember when you wake up. Now, when you go to sleep at night, you might want to give yourself a message. Well, I want to remember some of this stuff. Now, the lower part of yourself, the emotional body, remains with you during sleep, and this is what creates the dreams. And the reason the dreams don't make any sense is because it's created by the emotional part of yourself, which is not logical. And so your dreams are not logical. And the reason you can't really make decisions in your dreams is because the decision part of yourself is somewhere else. And this is one of the things that the white magician eventually does. He can break that barrier, so you can create a stream of light between yourself and your soul, so that actually you can tap into some of that consciousness that was occurring, and learning that it was occurring during your sleep. Now, he says, here's what the masters look for in people that they can work with. They look for people with whom they can train. The attitude of mind that they look for is teachableness and the ability to record and refrain from questioning until more is known. Then the aspirant is urged to question everything. Now, for those of us, I've taught the importance of resisting unearned authority, that total authority is a mark of the beast. So you might wonder, well, what does he mean you don't question anything until more is known? Well, if you're in the presence of a teacher, say, that knows Spanish very well and you don't know Spanish at all, then what good does it do to question if you don't know anything about it, you know? Once you learn a little bit of Spanish, then you can start asking intelligent questions. So he says, when you're in the state of really a teacher that knows what he's doing, he says the first thing to do is just absorb. And then after you understand a little bit and begin to see what's going on and see how the knowledge applies, then he says, question everything. And that's an interesting approach. He says, the masters do not feed the ego or the ambitious, but lead students toward a right use of knowledge. Many students are more preoccupied with what the master will do for them than what they will do in service. The student needs to concentrate on removing his own limitations. In particular, efficient use of time and focusing on what is important. Yeah, did you ever notice, kind of tabulate how much time each of us waste every day? Who would be good to pick on here? Annie, you're a very efficient gal. Even though you're very efficient, do you still find that there's a certain amount of time that just seems to be wasted in each day in your life?
Oh, yes. All the time. I
What's
really do.
what's your best approach in making maximum use of your time?
Well, I try to schedule my day like every morning. I will do some studying, some meditation, some yoga. And then in the afternoon, I will do more things like translating or writing my book or something like that, some kind of service at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then in the evening, I'll do more just reading for fun, not so much studying so hard, but reading more easy stuff.
Well, that's a good point. You know, they say all work and no play makes Joe a dull boy or whatever it is, and it's important that you have a little bit of space of time every day where you do something just frivolous or entertaining, recreational. I think that is an important factor. I don't consider that a waste of time when we do that. On the other hand, if you're just sitting back and watching football all day long and drinking beer, well, then that's that is kind of a waste of time. Once in a while, fine, but I try to schedule a little bit of time every day that's a little bit frivolous. I That's kind of like recharging a little bit. How about you, Joshua? Is that kind of your plan too, or how do you approach stuff?
In terms of,
Frivolous
well,
time. I mean, just time to do nothing for a little bit or something for you.
I have a lot of that because I kind of got a lot of, I don't know, difficulties to work through. So I need a lot more downtime than maybe some people.
Oh yeah.
But usually, so I don't necessarily feel that hanging around is a waste for me, like you were saying, doing enjoyable things.
Yeah.
But I think the time I definitely see as being wasted is like when you're talking to somebody. Like I'll have a sense that I'm supposed to talk to this person or whatever, and I'll talk to them, and then I'll have a sense that like, all right, it's done, but the person will keep going, and then it's like, but I won't feel to be like, all right, we're done, bye, So
Yeah.
it's like this kind of time wasted. But like you're not supposed to like make them stop, So
Yeah, I know the feeling. When we used to have our shop, we'd have customers come in and try to sell us on Amway or something like that, and we couldn't get rid of the guy, and he would only order just a really small order that took a lot more time than we maybe made 50 cents an hour on the guy. And and those type of people, just talk your arm and leg off with some choice thing that they have going. And yeah, you never know. You just those type of people you just have to put up with to a certain degree. You can't really like always get rid of them on the spot. Yeah. How about you, Jules? Do you got any advice on making use of time?
Hopefully my internet is holding up here.
Yeah, we can hear you.
One thing I found, okay, I found a while back, I realized how much time I was wasting on Facebook and thinking I mean, in my head, I was justifying it and being productive, but I found it really wasn't. And so I did all kinds of things to make it not so convenient just to look at Facebook all the time. I made it deliberately difficult to go there. So if I'm going there, there's a reason I'm going there. And I'm going there to read certain things. And I left a whole bunch of groups that were just sending me crap to read. And so I had to put up boundaries for myself. So I wasn't wasting time without thinking about it. And that's totally changed my life. Like freed up tons of time that I have to do other productive things. And I don't know, sometimes I have to set boundaries for myself, I guess.
Yeah, I don't go on my news feed very often on Facebook because once you start clicking on stuff, there's always one more thing comes up.
Right.
I try to stay with the groups. But yeah, if you get on those news feed, it can hook you in. And then you give, come across my kids and friends, and I think, well, I've kind of been neglecting them, so maybe I ought to put something on their timeline. So anyway, there's lots of distraction available on Facebook and the internet itself.
Yes, lots of shiny things everywhere.
I find myself reading more news than I really need to read. But,
yeah.
Well, Jill, did you say you had to go, or what was the deal?
No, I'm here. Oh, me?
Yeah, I saw a note there from you.
No, I was just saying goodnight to Asaf.
Oh, okay. He had us take off.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
Okay, well, good to have you. The master looks for three things with students and potential disciples. He looks for the light in the head and the karma of the aspirant, and he notes his service to the world. These are three important things. Now, like I said, they take it for granted, like becoming a decent person where you live a moral life and everything. That's like Religion 101, and it's kind of like graduating from kindergarten from a higher point of view. And this is like taken for granted that, say, the people like the group here are pretty decent individuals that try to do what's right and are harmless. And I can't think of anyone here in this group that isn't trying to do their best to, be a decent person. And he says the master's look on this is like a given for people that are working their way into acceptance. Then they look at these other things. Notes his service in the world. What have we actually done? So it's important that we glom onto some type of service. Now, for just people that are not in an extraordinary position like many of us, what can we do to be of service? Since I got you online here, Jill, what do you think?
Well, since I'm a retired teacher, I spent most of my life in service. So
you're like Annie. Annie's a retired teacher too.
Yeah, I know she is. I know, but there's different kinds of service. I mean, that was my career, and that was really, I think, service to society. But now that I'm retired, I find other outlets for service. Not right currently, but I have volunteered at a food bank that my daughter works at. And I write a lot. I do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of poetry, and I see that as a type of service too. It's not just self-service. It's not, for me. It's for anybody who reads it, any sharing that I do. And then in a more literal sense, I'm providing service for my mother because she's elderly and frail, and I help her almost every day. So I have service that goes in several different avenues.
Yeah, very good. Anybody else got any comments on service and how you think we can be of service, just as ordinary individuals?
I just want to point out something, that the service that each one of us do with the service that comes from within us and according to our own capabilities. But, you know, when I lived in Anaheim, California, the Jehovah Witnesses and the Mormons come around
Yeah.
to the house and they want to share what they had to share. And I would engage them in a several-hour discussion on the higher meaning of what they had learned in their own churches and try to bring out the actual meaning of these mysteries. And it was a good service for them. They would be glad to listen to what I had to say.
Did they actually listen?
Yeah.
Well,
Because,
you got farther than me. When they come to my door, they don't listen to me.
Well, the intuitive approach is where you use the language of their own intellect.
Yeah, that's what you got to do. If you really want them to stay, you start talking the Bible to them in their own language. Last time I saw one of the last times I saw Jehovah's Witness, he came and started preaching to me about something out of the Bible, and I says, "I'll tell you," or he wanted me to take his pamphlet, the Wake or whatever it's called. And I says, "I'll tell you what, I'll take mine. I'll take yours and read it if you'll take mine and read it." He says, "What do you got?"
My mother used to hand out the Science of Mind and Unity magazines when they came around.
Oh, yeah? But what I gave him was a pamphlet I had and printed for him. I handed it to him, and on the cover it says, "The Bible and Reincarnation." And the guy held it in his hand like it was a hot coal, like his hand was shaking, like he couldn't even hold on to it because it was painful. And so he handed it back to me and just turned around and left. I mean, he didn't want anything more to do with me when he saw that word reincarnation and the Bible.
Yeah, that's a way not to be of service. If you think you have a good idea and you're so closed off to hear anything the other person has to say. Like, there was this open house for this spiritual group. And, you know, I ran into one of these people for some church thing or other, and he was talking about stuff and handing out flyers or whatever. And I talked to him a little bit, and I was like, hey, you know, there's this thing going on. Yeah. And literally, the guy has it, and he's talking to me, and he crumples it up in his hand as he's talking.
Oh. Yeah, it's interesting how these people get so upset. I've like the first Immortal book I've handed out to a lot of my family and extended family, and then when I've been in their home and look in their bookcase, it's never there. And I figured they might have burned it. I know when I first got excommunicated from the church, I handed them out some literature and asked them if they read it, and they didn't throw it away, but they burned it, they said. So I often wonder if they burned their Immortal when I also give them that later on. You know why they burned it was because they felt if they threw it in the trash, somebody may dig it out and read it and be corrupted by Satan. And so they actually burned it. Curtis and I got a big laugh out of that. A number of people we encountered that actually burned our stuff. And I don't know if they said prayers they burned it or not. Who knows?
One of the things that I like to do, and I go to the senior center in Fayette and have lunch 3 times a week, and I like to get into discussions with people, and people are concerned about the things that are going on in the world, and I just try to point out, like we discussed earlier, that things are changing. I point out all the major changes that have happened in our lifetime. Each thing that has been hidden has come to the surface to be dealt with.
Right, and that's one thing DK talks about in this very rule, is that he talks about how things become, when positive change is occurring, often you'll have almost a tremendous amount of negativity in the air and conflict. And then we have the idea of harmony through conflict, and harmony is actually achieved through conflict. Right now we have tremendous conflict in the air, but eventually this is going to lead to a more harmonious state for humanity. Hopefully that'll come soon rather than later, but
things have to be broken before they can evolve.
Right. Right. We have to, like World War II created great change, but it was also great conflict. And so great change came after that, not only socially, but scientifically and in just about every way. Okay, he says this, that what the masters are looking for is what they call a lighted lamp. It says, it's actually a waste of time for some of these great lives to try to work with a disciple unless they've reached a certain degree of evolution where they can actually be receptive. If the person has a really strong ego or anything like that, then even though he's maybe done the black and white stuff, working with him can actually do more harm than good. What many aspirants and disciples have to do is rely heavily upon their own soul. Now remember, your own soul is a master on its own plane. That's why it's called the Christ consciousness, because your own soul is one with Christ, and it tunes into the consciousness of Christ. And so it reveals nothing to you but truth. Now, he says when the light in the head is present, he says it's indicative of 4 different things. First of all, he says the functioning to a greater or lesser extent of the pineal gland, which is well known is the seat of the soul and the organ of spiritual perception. And science as a whole really doesn't understand what the pineal gland is all about. You've never heard any scientists tell us that the pineal gland is the seat of the soul. But every physical organ or part is corresponding to some high spiritual correspondence. Then he looks for alignment with the soul. So this is our duty as fledgling disciples, is to align ourselves with the higher part of ourselves. And in common language, that is to align ourselves with the Christ consciousness or Christ or God, however a person wants to express it. Then the downflow of force via the satrotma, which is the life thread, that we have a life thread that connects us with all other lives to God. And this magnetic cord or thread from the soul to the brain via the mind, thus bringing correct perception and right contact. Notice he says right contact, because there's a lot of different wrong contacts. What wrong contacts do many fledgling disciples make? Edward, I bet you can give us an answer on, at least one answer on that.
Through the solar plexus and the sacral center.
Right, and what kind of contact do they make that's kind of leads them astray from there?
It's the astral confusion.
Right, astral confusion, astral entities. Okay, now, how about thought forms? Are there thought forms that many aspiring disciples contact?
According to your consciousness, your mind is like a radio. You tune it to the frequency and you get those thought forms.
Is there a thought form of Jesus out there?
There is a created thought form by the mass of devotees.
Right, right. So we have a thought form of Jesus wandering around, and a lot of people, when they wake up, maybe see Jesus at the foot of their bed telling them to be good people, and maybe recites the Lord's Prayer or something real simple like that. If it's information that isn't particularly new or revelatory to you, then it's probably a thought form of Jesus. And you notice most people that claim to see Jesus get information that is just can already be found in the Bible or writings of somebody else somewhere. Now, if you have somebody having an encounter that brings forth information that is new, that nobody that is unique, then that's the person to pay attention to. But he says creating this downflow through the mind to the brain and brings correct perception, so the person can tell the difference between an illusionary thought form and the real thing. Okay, any questions on that before we proceed? Yeah, I've encountered a lot of people who claim to have seen Jesus, and a lot of them tell me different things, or a lot of them encounter different things. Some people have had Jesus lead them to the fires of hell, showing everybody burning in hell that didn't accept the kind of the regular Christian version of Jesus. And others take them through paradise, and there's nothing but good, and there is no hell there. So, you know, you get all kinds of different Jesuses showing up, showing people different things.
Well, anyone who sees the Spirit mostly wants to say it's Jesus.
Right.
And there's another story about in Mexico, there were a group of people who saw an image they thought was Jesus on the wall, outside on some wall. And pretty soon it rained for a while, and some of the white washed off, and it turned out to be Willie Nelson.
Right. I remember a few years ago, there was this group here in Boise that I heard about, that they went up on a hill outside of Boise and met these flying saucers every week. And these flying saucers would come down and they'd see them, and they would receive messages by telepathy from the commander of the saucers. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. And I happened to bump into a person that was a member of this group, and I said, well, can I go up there with you? I'd like to see these flying saucers. They said, sure. So we all went up there together, and I was looking up in the sky. I didn't see any flying saucers, and we're all waiting for them to show up. And then finally, the gal pointed up, and there's one right up there. And I looked up and I said, no, that's not a flying saucer, that's Venus. And it just put a damper in the whole group when I said that. And all of a sudden, no flying saucer showed up. And I thought to myself, you know, if I would have went along with that Venus as the beginning of the flying saucer, I think the whole group would have imagined the flying saucers coming. but I put a damper on the whole thing, and the whole group was kind of, I think, a little annoyed at me for pointing out that that wasn't a flying saucer descending, but the planet Venus.
For every fiction, there is truth behind some of it.
Yeah, I'm convinced there are extraterrestrials, but a lot of the sightings out there are based on illusion. Just like there is a real Christ, but a lot of the sightings of the Christ are also illusion. So we want to get to the real thing, and this is one of the things that the Christ-like lives look for, is they look for people that are able to perceive the real from the unreal. Okay. So he looks for that downflow of energy from spirit to matter. And he says this brings out the dweller that must be dealt with. And this is what happens when the disciple begins to make contact and become useful. He then encounters the dweller on the threshold. And the dweller on the threshold, just like your soul is a link to your personal God, the dweller on the threshold is a link to your personal devil. Everybody has a personal devil, and it's your dweller on the threshold. The dweller on the threshold is accumulation of all your negative thoughts and vibrations for all of your lifetimes gather into one energy package. And it's controlled by very low elementary lives, and you could call these devils if you want to, but they're low elementary lives. And you have to break through the presence of the dweller on the threshold to be able to get to the angel of the presence. This is exemplified in the life of Joseph Smith. He went into a forest to pray, and when he prayed, who else here that's that background? What happened to Joseph Smith when he prayed, Lorraine?
He was overcome with darkness and he felt evil all around him. And it wasn't until he called out for Jesus to help him that they left. But they were overtaking him big time. Hey, I got a question about that. Is the dweller, is it ever a slow fight? Not instead of a big one like evil overtaking you, is it ever a like?
Oh yeah, your dweller follows you along until you are become a soul infused personality, and then it gradually loses its power over you. But until that time, you know, all these people expecting the end of the world, they're influenced heavily by their own dweller, and they're looking they just can't wait, a lot of them, for their neighbors to be destroyed while they will survive. And their personal dweller puts a lot of negative thoughts, or it's not so much it puts thoughts into your head as it's a force. It's a force that pulls your thoughts lower. And so it's something that we have to overcome and neutralize. And at one time in all of your lives, you will approach a time where you will have to face the dweller and overcome it. And then in each life after that, you'll face that again to some degree, but it won't be quite as difficult as it was the last time. Each life that you're born into, you kind of relive where you are up to the present. And this is also symbolized in your body. Your body, as you see it growing from a one cell to a full-grown baby, you know, it shows the development of life on the earth from amoebas up to the present human. You know, you even have a tail at one time in your mother's womb. And so the same thing when we're born in this life, we go through in miniature all of our evolution from the time of birth to about the age of 21. When you reach the age of 21, you're pretty much at the consciousness that you left off in your last life. And so you relive quite a few things from your past lives. But in miniature, it won't be as consuming as it was when the first time you face something. So if you overcome the dweller in this life, and your next life you'll still have to overcome it again, but it'll be a little bit easier because you've had the experience. And okay, any more questions on that before we move ahead?
The dweller is also a part of the sea of mental garbage that hangs around the earth. And as you tune your mind to that frequency, you absorb it. Right,
there's a planetary dweller. And the planetary dweller is the combination of all the negativity of all the human race all put together in one package. And DK tells us that this is what Christ faced in the Garden of Eden. He faced the planetary dweller. So us facing our individual dweller, well, we complain about that. So you can imagine the problem that Christ had in facing the planetary dweller. And he says he was able to break through and create a light from him to the Ancient of Days.
It's our responsibility to redeem that energy and that dweller.
Right. Right. All energy and all the lower lives eventually move forward. So as we move forward, we pull other smaller lives along with us. Okay, good discussion. He makes this point. He says, the path of the just is a shining light. That's a scripture that he quotes. The path of the just is as a shining light. And yet, at the same time, a man has to become that path itself. He enters the light and becomes the light and functions then as a lamp set in a dark place, carrying illumination to others and lighting the way before them. It's interesting. It's a pretty deep thought to consider that the person to find the path has to become the path. How in the world do you become the path? Let's get Nick's idea on this. What does that mean? To become the path and to enter the light, you become the light. What do you think that means, Nick?
It's a little hard to figure out on short notice, but I think it has to do in part with assisting others and with sort of becoming the holding the principles involved so close that you, in a sense, become these higher ideas in addition to just acting on them.
That's a good point. By serving others and trying to help others, you become a light to them, and you become the light, in a way of speaking. It's a little bit like they say, if you wind up teaching a class, you'll learn a lot more than attending a class. And so I appreciate you guys attending this class, because you helping me to learn myself. Because to teach something, you certainly absorb it. It really helps you to absorb it. Okay, there's a lot of deep meaning behind that, though. That might be a good seed thought to end with here, is to contemplate on, to become the path, or to find the path, you become the path. And to find the light, you become the light. And of course, to become a desire to assist others is certainly a step in that direction. Yeah, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. But he also said that, told us that greater things than I have done shall you do. So if he was the light of the world and we're supposed to be able to do greater things, then we will be lights of the world also. So that's one of the great things about the teachings of Jesus, is he didn't keep everything to himself. He didn't try to be a special being. He healed others, and then he taught his disciples how to heal others. He performed miracles, and then his disciples performed miracles just as great. And so his mission was to bring others up to where he was. And there's a scripture that says, Beloved, we are now the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. When he appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. We shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Okay, and that's the goal, to be like the Christ, like the higher, the masters that have overcome death and all things. So, okay, any questions before we wrap it up here? Time is just about up. We'll just end by saying the great invocation. And it's reported that the Christ says this every day himself. And as he says it, he visualizes the words going out to the whole world. Sound the Om with me. Om. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. Visualize a light going out from the mind of God and then descending upon all those who are willing to receive. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Om, 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 om. Okay, my friends, thanks for hanging in there. Good energy with you today. I can feel it.
Good luck, JJ.
And we
Thanks.
need to see the same light going to Washington, D.C.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's true.
And thanks everybody for the energy and the uplift. I felt it and I needed it.
Oh, good.
Yes, thank you also.
Yeah, well, great, Rowena, and
Good luck to you both.
yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. And JJ.
Thank you. We'll see you next week. I'll be next Sunday at 10 o'clock p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, unless notified otherwise.